Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Lion update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything, football, the NBA, college basketball, the NHL, the UFC, and other MMA events. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available now, but it won't last much longer. Check in with your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. This week, Penn State is in West Lafayette, Indiana to face the 1-8 Purdue Boilermakers. Penn State coming off of a dominant victory against the Washington Huskies at home in a whiteout at Beaver Stadium by a score of 35-6. Just needs to keep on winning. Yes, the rankings came out last night. Yes, Penn State is still in the mix, obviously, for the college football playoff. However, you got to win out. Period. So this is a down Purdue team. I think that's putting it lightly, but Penn State has to focus on the task at hand. Also, we're going to get into some conversation about Nick Singleton, the transfer portal, the House versus NCAA situation. There's a lot of stuff to dive into. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications. As always, get at us on social media at State of State Pod. Get in our comment section on YouTube. You guys are always outspoken. We appreciate it so much. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free, for just 99 cents a month. You can hit the join button on our home channel, or you can follow the link in the description of this podcast. The holidays are around the corner, so give somebody the gift of State of State for 99 cents ad-free. It's really simple that way. Justin, one last thought on Penn State versus Washington this past weekend. I saw a lot of people on social media really speaking very highly of this performance, and it's like, yes, it was good, but you and I talked about in the recap episode, the personnel for Washington is what it is. It was a positive step. It was the right thing you had to put on tape, but what did we ultimately learn about this Penn State football team?
We learned that they will beat the teams that they're supposed to beat, right? And I think they're still a very good football team. It's just like when you have to punch up a little bit how they perform. And just across the board, again, it's pretty stable, like a stable quality football team from that standpoint. But, I think the main thing in this current landscape is winning, right? Survive, win, move to the next game. Survive, win, move to the next game. So as long as do that and don't falter into these quote unquote trap games or lesser opponents, I think it's going to be an interesting ending of the year.
So this week, Penn State is on the road at Purdue, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Purdue just got shellacked by Ohio State in Columbus by a score of 45-0. At the time we're recording this, the spread for Penn State versus Purdue, according to our friends at BetOnline, is in favor of Penn State by 28.5. I always hate big numbers like that when it comes to betting, but you guys do what you will on that front. Purdue won its first game of the year against Indiana State, and it's been a steady decline ever since. It's more of a spread offense. Hudson Card, who spent 3 years at Texas, has been primarily the quarterback this season, in and out of the lineup. They have a solid pair of running backs in Maccabee and Reggie Love, who Penn State fans might remember from his time at Illinois, was doing a lot of good things in Brett Bielema's backfield. I don't know if there's too much for us to really dive into. This is not a very good Purdue football team. And I understand, yes, they took Northwestern to overtime very recently. So every once in a while, you have to be aware of what teams like this can do. But this environment, the way Penn State just played, the things Penn State has to play for, I don't have a ton of concerns about it. But going into this game, I think the one concern that is very, very much warranted for Penn State football fans is the health of running back Nick Singleton. It was earlier on this week that James Franklin said Nick Singleton is out with what he has dubbed a short-term injury. If you remove Nick Singleton from the equation, does that hurt you against Purdue? Not necessarily, but it is something to think about. What do you feel about the situation with Singleton and the running back room as it stands?
It's a wait and see type of situation. You hate to see like any type of short-term injuries this late into the year because running backs just take a pounding regardless, right? So we see that. I mean, we saw the reports, like you said, of the different things within the transfer portal going on. But I mean, we saw that there was some depth there when Corey came in and had a nice little run and different things like that. Maybe that's a changeup that they need, whether it's loosening up the defense and bringing some of those safeties out of the box to where Ron Allen and I mean when Nick Singleton eventually comes back to full tilt are able to exploit those different areas. But it's not something that you want to hear this late in the season, especially when it starts getting cold.
Especially when it starts getting cold, and especially if there's a potential for Penn State to host a playoff game. It's going to be freezing in late December. So you definitely want to be able to rely on your running backs. A story that surfaced earlier on this week, according to Pete Nakos from On3, is that Penn State is in contact with the transfer portal running back LaShawn Williams, formerly of Iowa. Now, if there's any truth to this, I don't entirely know if they are. I really don't. It's such a Wild West situation right now, Justin. You probably have a better understanding than I do. Is this tampering? Is it totally legal? Like the transfer portal opens up in mid-December. So I'm not going to get into all that, but it is interesting. That's like, oh yeah, this is kind of like mid-season free agency as if you're in the National Football League. And then practically say you went and got a running back in the portal and you brought him on campus in December. Can he play immediately? Is it something where that makes sense to play a transfer player immediately, potentially in a playoff setting when they have weeks potentially to learn a playbook, something like that? Like there's a lot of layers to this. And again, taking it with a grain of salt, this may be just speculation. I don't know. What did you think about this when you saw the story?
It's a new day, right? Like I know the kid announced that he was jumping to the transfer portal, so let himself, I guess, open up to suitors from that standpoint. So I don't know if there's back channels. I mean, there are back channels, right? But how much they're involved in that player, you never know. But I don't know if that player can come in and then transfer and then play into the playoffs. That'll be an interesting thing to see. But I mean, you got to cross all your T's and dot your I's in this day and age because things are changing on a day-to-day basis. So, I mean, we'll see. Let's play it that way.
If it is LaShawn Williams was very good at Iowa. Now we've seen how Caleb Johnson has taken over there and is a Heisman candidate at least. And Iowa's deficiencies being what they are, he's probably not going to win the Heisman, but still the numbers he's putting up are outstanding. Iowa has a history of, I don't mean to say this in a negative way, Justin, but just kind of like no-name running backs that it's like, this guy's good. He might not do much in the NFL or something like that, but like their system works, their offensive line is very talented, and their running backs are consistently productive. Penn State just kind of got done with a transfer portal situation at running back with Trey Potts last season, bringing him from Minnesota. Potts was effective, but decided to go to the National Football League. I believe he had more eligibility, so could have stuck around if he wanted to. So that was his decision. But yeah, it begs the question, like if you bring in LaShawn Williams specifically, what do you think about his game and how do you think it adds to Penn State's running game?
He's a quality running back. How much does it add? I think it adds a level of depth, right? They have Tyke Hayes coming up in January. They have Quentin Morton coming off of injury. And then you got the 2 running backs coming back. I mean, that's a pretty nice stable of running backs. But I think iron sharpens iron. So anytime that you add a quality player to that mix, and running backs are pretty interesting, right? You can find running backs all over. Not to devalue those guys a little bit, but like when you find in the right situation and running styles, I mean, they can become valuable assets to the offense.
Especially this time of year, is something James Franklin has spoken about a lot, and especially earlier on this week, talking about like the Quentin Martin Juniors of the world, the Corey Smiths of the world, the Max Granvilles of the world, being very aware of red shirts, the red lights, green lights, yellow lights, as he likes to put it, and also is it like break glass in a case of emergency? He's talked about that earlier this week of like, hey, do we need to win a football game? Get Max Granville out there to play defensive end. So, you're in an absolute emergency where multiple guys go down and you got to get to that spot. And then is it just kind of like what we saw with Corey Smith against Washington, where it's like, hey, let's take a look. Let's see how it goes. It's late in the game. From your past experience with this program and elsewhere, how do you manage red shirts now that you're into November and the season's just even longer with the playoff potentially looming for Penn State?
I mean, the thing with red shirts is keep them there mentally, right? Because like they're not playing in the game. With the new NCAA rule, you can play 4 games. It's like trying to use that in a strategic way to see if they're ready and kind of what you're predicting for the future, whether it's somebody that's going to continue to stay on the roster or like if they kind of completely falter and if somebody that you're going to kind of bump out to, hate to say it, but like bump out to bring in somebody else, like if they're like fit to play. It's just the age of like how development is treated a little bit differently. But if that player has potential, there's like true talent management that comes along with keeping that player happy, letting them see games, and like almost showing that there's a path forward for them so that they don't just abandon the depth of the football team that is critically needed if you want to have a successful program to continue to move forward. So it's a very nuanced situation. I think it's player to player, but Penn State does a great job in the sense of just the philosophical approach of building depth when you see them rotating a lot of guys in and getting a chance to play, and then transparency along with that, right? Like that red, yellow, green, or whatever that, that system that they go by. Like a player knows where they stand. So like as long as like you're up front, that's all you can ask for, man. The guys don't have to like it. They just have to respect it. And I think that's the approach where that can really thrive.
In terms of this game this weekend at Purdue, it's a down Purdue team. Penn State is in a good position right now, and it's about just winning out, period. What's that fine line between making sure you're winning the game and then keeping everybody healthy?
Building depth, right? Like I think being able to play second, third string or younger players to the point and still meeting that standard, right? I think that is the key when it comes down to all these different type of situations. And like again, not to beat up on Purdue, but I think these are the type of games where you kind of see with those freshmen or those guys that are redshirt and like what they're made of, right? And obviously getting a nice lead and not risking anything for unnecessary causes, but it's critical to have depth because, attrition and injuries happen late in the season. And like the teams that are healthy are typically the better teams. And that's something that you want to continue to look for Penn State moving into this like playoff scenario.
Is there any specific underclassman or at least player that's lower on the depth chart right now that you're like, I'd love to see a little run for them against Purdue?
Not necessarily. I'd like to see Quinn Moore and get back out there and run around a little bit, just as another option. And someone that has home run ability and that's pretty athletic. That's same since high school. Like to see him jump in and get some action. But other than that, that's probably it. You may see a little bit of Tamir Robinson on defense, like just some of the younger guys that have been there. Just want to see what they got.
If possible, I wouldn't hate seeing Tysier Denmark. And
absolutely, he's a great one.
And again, I'm not completely up to speed on this guy's played X amount of snaps in this many games or anything like that. So he could be unavailable in that respect. They might want to protect him in that way, but I would love to see more of Tysier Denmark. And if at all possible, I would love to see Ethan Grunkemeyer. I don't know if that's even something they're thinking about in 2024 because you have such a good backup in Bo Burbula. You really don't need to, but it'd be cool to see what his skill set is, considering the way that James Franklin has said he is a combination of the skill sets of Aller and Prbula. I'd love to see that.
That would make it. That would make you want to. That would make it very enticing to see him jump in there. I mean, just to see if the eval is real, right? I mean, I think he might be able to be used one of these last couple games. I mean, I don't think he's played yet this year or registered a snap, has he?
I don't believe so.
Yeah. So with that being said, I mean, he's another one. But yeah, Tyser Denmark would be that'd be my other tab that I would want to see get some run.
Justin, earlier on this week, you were posting some stuff on your social media, specifically your Instagram. For those that don't already follow Justin, you should, at j.king_lig. And you were posting a lot of information about the current court case between the House and the NCAA. And it's obviously very complicated. And you've mentioned it on this show in terms of the upcoming salary cap, I guess, essentially, that we're going to be seeing in the near future, and a lot of changes when it comes to revenue sharing. Can you surmise some of the developments that have gone down lately?
Well, yeah, I think anytime that we talk about really operating a business, you have to watch your costs and how many people are actually playing and kind of taking the rose-colored glasses off of amateurism, right? When you're carrying 140 players on a football team, that's going to be reduced to 105. In other sports will, correspond with that type of engagement where it's just a lot less fluff, because like that financial flexibility is diminishing, right? Now that you have to pay players, you have to still pay for logistics, and you have to find ways to not create money, but you have to find ways to displace some money that was being spent frivolously before, but because now that money goes into the players, and there has to be some level, I can't say parity, but rules to where you have to have the same amount of players, like who are you allocating the funds to and things of that nature. So when that happens, it's a very interesting time, and it's something for like players to understand, where like this whole aspect of college sports being just like this development nurturing ground, it's just not the case. It's like a time to perform or perish, I like to say, because you're going to be expected. Yeah, you're going to get some money, you're going to get some funds, but you're going to be expected to participate at a high level and create value to the product, right? And so that's a little bit different than it's essentially been. I mean, it's always been like that, but now, I mean, the rules indicate and reinforce that as well. So that's kind of what we're looking at with this whole house settlement and roster limits and asset allocation, guys getting cut, not performing up to their due, and coaches being able to have the transfer portal. We've kind of been ushered into it in a ramp up phase where we're seeing like NIL, transfer portal, and all these different components of professional sports. But now that we get into the nitty gritty of media rights and revenue sharing, it gets tighter and tighter. So I think the best days of athlete flexibility are going to be gone here pretty soon.
It just felt like a matter of time, because this has just been so loose. We continuously use the phrase the Wild West with this entire NIL transfer portal era, and it was inevitable that some regulations were going to be put in place. And it's the realistic aspect of like, there's going to be less scholarships to go around. There might be less years of eligibility that you have to play. There might be less options in terms of that. James Franklin talked about it this week, of a player just telling the coach that, oh, I'm redshirting this year, versus the team telling him he's redshirting this year. So there's just all these little changes in terms of I'm very much in favor of the players having control and power over their career, because guess what? When you go and play college sports, it's the beginning of your athletic career, really. And it's not to say that it isn't in high school. That's the preparation for it. But once there's a dollar amount next to your name, it's a job. It's your career. So it's just changed so much, and it's probably for the best. And I look at programs like Florida State, for instance, just completely falling off a cliff this year, relying too much on the transfer portal, and players not necessarily feeling terribly motivated to move forward, because like, checks in the bank, that's fine. And then you look at Pat Narduzzi at Pitt talking about, it's like, oh, we're going to create a tiered system that you're going to earn money as you're here, and we're going to do a really low minimum or something like that. And Penn State has a similar model, but different. Everybody's just a little bit different. It does feel like there's going to be some uniformity at some point, and it's just very, very complicated. And if anything, it's trying to put to bed this whole issue of what do the players deserve versus what are they getting.
Right.
The latter has been the really big question.
Yeah, I mean, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? That's the craziest thing. One thing I've learned just in my time in the sports business is there's more than one way to skin a cat, but alignment is necessary. You have to have alignment on however you want to skin that cat, what tools you want to use, how you're going to invest in those tools, and the actual operation and execution of skinning that cat, right? So I think that's the beautiful thing, or a thing that I like to watch when you're talking about different programs and how they're approaching it. Yes, we know that money is the root of flexibility and able to get the best players and able to get the best coaches and resources and support and all those different type of things. But like how you use that money is extremely valuable nowadays, right? And it's going to be it's going again. It all comes back down to talent acquisition. But like, what type of players are you bringing into your program? Like, what is the makeup? Is there a belief in like, do they want to be at that university? Understanding, like you said, the right value systems for the quarterbacks, the receivers, the left tackles, the defensive ends. Like, who are you actually paying? Is it an elite corner or is he just an okay corner? Like those little decisions that you had to make, and sometimes we just kind of fall under the radar. Those are no longer just a slap on the wrist type of offenses, right? These things can really derail programs depending on how they even use the dead money and playing a player that doesn't pan out, like that you have to get rid of them to relinquish the cash, or however even the NIL stacks up as supplemental income from the media rights. All those different type of engagements really, I think, go to the product when you talk about evaluating like coaches and personnel and everybody within the building, because it's just you just don't have overflow of cash or that financial flexibility. So now that you're having all these different components that go to the program, I think that alignment and one evaluation platform for like the whole team to kind of understand, with even the coaches, they're somewhat like independent contractors, right? Like they can go to team and they have a lot of say in the players that are coming in. So like understanding and getting all those things under wraps is going to be extremely critical for all programs moving forward. So, you see, we see it now this year. Like you got to take away the logo for a lot of teams because you don't know exactly who you're playing, and then you can kind of see when you see them, the teams that have a personnel deficiency versus the teams that have a personnel advantage that maybe don't have the blue blood logos, right? Like you see a Georgia Tech beat up on Miami. You see, Ole Miss is good, but they beat up on Georgia. We see different things all across the board. The more that continues to operate and matriculate, I think it's going to be pretty cool to see, to be completely honest.
Indiana beat the brand in Michigan, but
There
that's
you
a
go.
five Wolverines team, and
Right.
they gave Indiana some trouble there in the second half. So things to pay attention to. I want to wrap up on some comments made by James Franklin earlier on this week in his press conference. And our good friend at statecollege.com, Mike Poorman, asked the question to James: over the 11 years of his time at Penn State, there's been so much discussion of facilities need to be improved, training table needs to be improved, et cetera, et cetera. The stadium needs to be improved. All these big infrastructure type projects that have helped improve the football program. And in a lot of ways, it's playing catch up to what the modern game is. If you go to an aforementioned Georgia, Ole Miss, Ohio State, Alabama, what are their facilities and services like versus what Penn State has? So it's been that for a number of years. And Mike Poorman's question, kind of reading between the lines here myself, was: you've been talking about these big fixes for 11 years. The stadium is going to be renovated over the next 3 years, I believe. So the question was, what else is there in terms of big projects for the football program? James Franklin really didn't answer that question. He gave a lot of praise to Dr. Benapudi, gave a lot of praise to Pat Kraft, newer members of the athletic department, in terms of all their work and efforts to go in to make these big changes to help Penn State become more competitive. But he didn't point out one specific thing. I can look at it in a couple of ways. One, the question is fan and community fatigue of, okay, what else do we need to fix, James? Because what's happening on the field is still great, but not elite. And then James not answering that question. And yes, giving praise to the appropriate people who control his job in the long term. So I don't know if there's really much that you can glean from this, Justin, and obviously your relationship with the team, but still hearing that question, I think it's a fair question from the fan base of kind of like, okay, for over a decade now, this needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. Okay. It's not that that list is ever going to stop. It's kind of like owning a home. There's always going to be something that needs to be repaired or improved or upgraded. Sure. But there's a fan base feel of, are you out of excuses?
I don't think, I mean, just from an objective view, I don't think they're out of excuses. I mean, even we just look at the financial implications, or, you know, how teams are being supported by different NIL situations. Like, I think that's a real thing. Sometimes I even downplay like what the actual thing is, because I value, you know, like I said, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Mm-hmm.
But like the resources that we're playing with versus, you want to talk about like a LSU or Ohio State or even Michigan, even though the outcomes, or Texas A&M, like those, like we're performing at the top level when you talk about the resources coming in, regardless of us having 110,000 people at a game or 111,000 people. I think though the elephant in the room whenever we speak about having any more excuses is like, the real excuse is like fans pulling the mirror back on themselves, or like, are we contributing enough? Regardless of how much you spend on a ticket, regardless of how much you for your ticket and licenses and all those different type of things, and what's the I'm trying to think of the minivan, not the minivans, but your trailer,
RVs.
the RV parking and all those different things, because like all that goes into the environment of Penn State. But when we look at it, just that pure cash and that slush fund that comes in to kind of deal with different type of things, where I think James does have to be a little bit more creative. I probably know a lot more from that standpoint when you talk about Penn State football, but we are not equal to the teams that we're trying to compare ourselves to when it comes to that level of support, regardless if people want to show up to the games on the weekend or not. But that pure cash slush fund type of situation, if that's the excuse that they kind of want to throw, which I think is got to walk on eggshells when he does that, because it can be offensive to fans. Like you just said, is like, is there another excuse? Like, and to me, like the biggest excuse hasn't been even touched on yet, right? We could talk about the runway at the airport and all these different aspects, but the real reality is, until, you know, the Penn State ecosystem and fans want to like support and find cash flow or slush funds that kind of build into the program whenever is needed when it comes to that talent acquisition process, that's what's going to be. We talk about Ohio State last year, like he made a public service announcement. We need $15 million. Like James has never said that. Right. And if he had said that, like people would be calling for his head at Penn State. Yep. So like even that mentality right there, the compare and contrast for us to lose one touchdown to them, you got to understand, like, you know, if you're working at a 5-star restaurant versus a different type of restaurant, not to downplay Penn State, but like, I think if there was an excuse, that's an excuse that I think he cannot say that. I mean, that I'm saying now is the cash isn't equal.
The cash isn't equal. And then also, I don't know how you would even begin to communicate that in a press conference setting, or even in any sort of platform that James might have the access to. Like, he's not going to put up a dry erase board and be like, Georgia has X, we have Y, here's what their facilities look like, here's what we have. Like, I don't know how you would necessarily communicate that effectively. So I can empathize, I suppose, with him not being able to go into detail. But it is frustrating for fans of like, okay, like we don't know what goes into all this. And I think it's just a desire to know. And I think part of that is like, I think Penn State fans want to help and want to be part of the solution and raising money. And it's obviously that fine line for fans of like, all right, how much is enough money? But like, they don't know what it's going towards.
I mean, it's raising money. And then there's like, I mean, I'm not going to say that Penn State has had the greatest strategy in reaching, you know, the current fan base and like what actually moves moves the needle for them. But at the same time, if we kind of take off the blinders of why not, instead of like, okay, what can we do? You know what I mean? I think you start looking at the situation a little differently. Like, to say that Penn State fans don't have a critical eye because of, I mean, let's just say the 75 years of being built under Joe Paterno, the ideals and all the things that kind of came with that. Cash is bad. It brings in these type of people. like all that different type of stuff, right? You have some supporters that I know that the team has where there's like younger alumni that are dishing out cash and doing different things and supporting, but it's like it's a handful of people, right? And when you got a new stadium project that's going on, like everybody's just hearing money. I mean, we could think about it like politics. Now, people don't listen to the policies, regardless of left, right, or whatever the case may be. It's just like, yo, who's evoking that emotion? So I think there's a little bit more of understanding the fans and what they can get around because obviously they're willing to support, but it's kind of hard to tell people that are willing to support. I need you to support like this and not like not thinking that this over here is everything that you need, right? So like it is nuanced and I think it's difficult, but I think it's difficult and the elephant in the room is I think the Penn State faithful have to recognize that that's a real hurdle and if we're going to jump over it, it has to come from within. It's not something that he does. It's not something outside. It's like, hey, the alumni need the help. Like, yeah, everybody that's listening to the show, we're alumni. We any way that you could try to help or get into it, and it has to be impactful help, right? When you're talking about like a Dave Portnoy that's like, hey, we need a quarterback. I got $5 million for a quarterback.
Right,
I don't know if there's a Penn State like alumni that will give that money to the football. They might give it to.
I've been waiting for you to do it. I mean, geez,
come on, man. Hey,
I'm kidding.
I'm not going to go into that too much.
I'm kidding.
But like it might give it. Our fan base might give it to a school like School of Liberal Arts or engineering school. Like we might have like those different type of things, but like that's just kind of the makeup of our fan base, and not wrong, right, or indifferent, but it's something that we have to really look at when you say, is there any more excuses? Because like I actually think there are more excuses, even though they still need to get over that line. But to like coach with what they're doing, and like it's like the Pirates going to the World Series all the time. It's like, oh, you have one of the lowest payrolls, and you're competing against the Yankees or the Dodgers. It's like, what do you want? Like, hey, and again, that's not an excuse. That's a reality that people need to kind of understand in this current landscape. Yes, you have to do the best with what you have, but I think even coaching decisions and things of that nature, I always go back to talent acquisition players. So I might even be more heavily on that, but yeah, I think it's a real thing.
And even realistically, say there's a world where James Franklin is like, I'm going to do a town hall and I'm going to outline everything, dollar amounts. Here's what they have versus what we have. From a PR standpoint for the program, that sounds like a horrible move because then you signal to recruits, you signal to your fan base, other programs, how behind you are in black and white. Like there's what you can say versus what you can't say.
That's why I said it's extremely hard to do. And so it's like, I mean, you kind of point at these different components of like, hey, the runway, we got to travel like this, or we need NIL money, or it's like, I don't think, the fundraising is the best like way of doing it the way that we fundraise. I don't know if that's it. Maybe it is like pointing out, like finding those donors that like endorse or like endorse a position. Like, hey, this is the so-and-so quarterback position. Like, I don't know exactly. I have ideas, but like games to be sold, not told. But there's ways of getting people to support and be invested into the success of the program, right? And I just think everybody needs to take a little bit of the blinders off from that standpoint. If Penn State wants to really get to a level of which they say, I know we keep saying like, oh, we're good, not great. But it's like, all right, we're sitting at what, 8-1 right now?
Mm-hmm.
Looking at a top 5 team and going to the playoffs. When I scale out, like, I kind of deal everywhere. It's like, I think they're doing pretty good for what resources they're playing with versus the people that are above them. I don't think there's a team of like that's ranked higher than them with less resources. Like if you want to point it that way, like,
yeah, it's fair.
Like there isn't. And so it comes down to like, it is a big bang, take little bang type of business.
It is a business. That being said, this weekend, Penn State at Purdue, 8-1 versus 1-8. This is a type of game. Get in, get out, get a win, stay healthy, get your backups in there, see what you can do, gain more experience, that sort of thing. But this is a business trip. No disrespect to what Purdue is, but this is literally the worst team in the Big Ten. And No, not to be disrespectful, but like this is the lowest team in the Big Ten, and they are struggling this year. So Penn State should have no problem with the Boilermakers this weekend. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications as always. Get at us on State of State Pod on social media. Get in our comment section on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, commercial-free, ad-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State, ad-free for just 99 cents a month. This Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, Penn State at Purdue in West Lafayette on CBS. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle at State of State Pod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.